Missed me? I doubt it. It's been a while. It's so good. I wasn't on camera for about a month, maybe more. At this point, if I made it on camera, it's a good day. Though I thought it would be beneficial for the channel and myself, and perhaps you as well, to finally film my worst books of 2024. Because it is the end of January, and at this point, I'm not just lazy, I'm literally late to everything. In all honesty, I have just a few books on my list that I didn't like and that I actually want to talk about. But I also have a DNF and one possible DNF. We will discuss it. The first book that I want to talk about is Serpentine, Valentine by Giana darling. And I even have a whole reading vlog about it because I was really excited about the concept. But I think the reason why I hated it so much is exactly because I loved the concept and was anticipating the book. And I know that quite a few people loved it, but I mean, I don't want to invalidate their opinions, but I also think that as a woman that likes women, that is a very tough read because of quite a few lesbophobic stereotypes that are simply ingrained in this book. And I'm pretty sure that the author could have done a better job with it. Some of the tropes were just called for in this specific plot and in this specific type of the story, but there could have been some nuance in my opinion. So Serpentine Valentine is one of those spicy indie romances about a young woman that is raped on campus by her professor that she's very close to and that gets shunned. She's away from campus for quite a bit, and when she comes back she is resolved and wants to avenge herself and wants the people that were involved to be punished. First and foremost, the professor that raped her, but also the principal of the university. She basically covered the tracks for this man. The protagonist decides to organize her own vigilante group that helps other women to avenge themselves in the face of sexualized violence. And she also is trying to seduce the director's daughter to humiliate her, I guess. It's a complicated motive and the logic is not logicy sometimes, but I was willing to accept it and forgive it and suspend my disbelief if the book would have been done well. But the problem is, as I've said, some negative stereotypes that were not warranted. The protagonist comes off as predatory, and it's not positive, and it's not cute. You may like a dominant lady, but at the end of the day, everything has to be consensual, and there were quite a few very cursive scenes in this book. I would say they were in the gray area, but still made me uncomfortable. Plus, some of the sex scenes were odd, to say the least. The language that was used wasn't particularly, how should I put it, appetizing. It wasn't good. Some of it was just very, very odd. I'm not going to quote it, but there may have been some turn of a phrase that mentioned salted pasta water. For future details, reference my reading blog. The plot was a little naive and simple. There were quite a few things in the book that didn't seem plausible at all. They wouldn't have ever happened, but for the sake of the plot, the author included them. I feel like at the end of the day, this book is a flop, and I didn't like it. The next book that I want to talk about is one of those books that I didn't like, but I think a lot of people will enjoy. It's Can't Spell Treason Without T by Rebecca Thorne. I actually made a video about books that I didn't like, but I think other people will like, and explained who exactly is going to like it and who's the target audience of the book in my opinion, so if you missed it, I'm going to link it. But Can't Spell Treason Without Tea is one of those cozy fantasy books with a fat slice of romance, and the romance in it is sapphic, so I guess it has a lot of buzzwords that I'm curious about in general, so I picked it up. It's a little long. I also realized after reading this book that cozy fantasy is not for me. I love conflict, and I'm not big on established relationships because established relationships are usually really boring. It's a snooze fest for me. I want to see how the couple got together, and I'm not interested what they're going to do next unless there is some conflict and it's a marriage in trouble type of story. This is not marriage in trouble. It's just about these two women. One is a guard, one is a magician. The guard works for the queen, who is famously tyrannical, and they want to leave, so they leave and they open a bookstore and a tea shop far away from the kingdom, and hoping that no one's going to find them. And the story is about them trying to build their life in this new setting, new circumstances. There are a few mini conflicts. They're not big conflicts, and you're not worried about the characters. There are literally no stakes, which is cozy fantasy. I cannot deal with fluff. I'm not into it. I do not read books for that. I think people that love cozy fantasy, if you're sure, if you know, if you're confident that you love cozy fantasy and you love sapphic romance, you're going to enjoy this, I guess. And I'm actually really grateful to this book because I finally made a decision for myself to never pick up cozy fantasy again. The next book that also left some sort of an aftertaste for me is Delicate Condition by Danielle Valentine. It is a 3-star book, so it's not the worst of the worst, but the worst books are the books that I was disappointed by. There has to be a specific feeling about them. Sometimes I don't even mention in the worst books my 1-star reads. I just don't care about them, so I don't care to rant about them or whatever. But with Delicate Condition, the thing is, I loved almost the entirety of it. I loved the first 80%. I thought it was brilliant. I was interested in the story. It was suspenseful enough. It delivered the messaging very well. The characters were fascinating, but at the end of the day, I just hated the ending. At the end of the day, I just hated the ending. You get it. Delicate Condition is about an actress who is in her 30s and who really wants a baby. She's obsessed with becoming a mother, and she struggles with fertility, and she's surrounded by harmful messaging such as women in their 30s shouldn't have kids because the kids for sure are going to be ill with something, or that she won't be able to handle it as a 30-year-old woman. She is also an actress, and she literally just broke out at 30, and she has to somewhat sacrifice her career to have a child. So because she's so focused on this idea and this dream, she's paranoid about this entity or person or something trying to make her not pregnant, trying to force her to lose the baby when she got pregnant, obviously, or to not allow her to conceive the baby when she was not pregnant. It's a big journey, and we're trying to figure out if there is some element of mysticism there, perhaps, or it's actual humans trying to prevent her from being a good mother. Now, this novel has a lot of interesting things to say about womanhood in general, about motherhood, about the sacrifices that women make to become mothers. I loved a lot of the descriptions. I think they were monstrous and horrible in the best way possible. This book has a wonderful atmosphere, not as in fluffy, cute, and lovely, but wonderful as in well described, scary. But it all broke down when I got to the end of it. It's not what I wanted to see. It broke the believability for me, and I simply didn't like it. I am very pragmatic and cynical. So for me, this book immediately turned into bullshit. It was done well. There were quite a few things that I really loved about this. And it could have been a 5-star even, if not for that ending. Let's move on to the DNFs, or one DNF and one possible DNF. The book that I'm DNFing for sure is A Dark and Drowning Tide by Allison Saft. It was one of the Feeble Book Club books that we've chosen collectively. I wasn't the one, I'm not responsible for it. If you read this book with me on Feeble and you didn't love it, don't blame me for it. I know that some people enjoyed it though, so, you know, I cannot make myself finish it. I'm so bored. There's something about it, with the way it's written specifically, that just makes my eyes glaze over. I simply don't care. It doesn't read like an adult fantasy as well. It reads like a young adult fantasy. And when I read a little bit about Allison Saft and looked up her work, I realized this is her first adult fantasy, which makes sense. Immediately all the things step into their places. This is about a woman named 𝕊𝕊𝕀𝕸𝕃. She is a folklorist in a world that is very clearly inspired by pre-war, mid-war Germany, circa World War II. 𝕊𝕊𝕀𝕸𝕃 is obviously Jewish. The author has not done much in terms of the world building. She simply took it from history and gave it different names, which I don't appreciate. To me, it reads at best like a young adult book, because as an adult, you have to do a little bit more work to entertain me or to keep my attention. If it's literally a copycat from history and you're not labeling your book as historical fantasy, that's a pass from me. So already that I didn't like. But 𝕊𝕊𝕀𝕑 is a folklorist, which means she collects folklore about different magical beasts, and she is a part of an expedition with 6 other members that are trying to find a river that grants people magical powers or something like that. On their first day of the expedition, their professor dies, and she is obligated to this woman because she's the one that picked her and brought her to the university. 𝕊𝕊𝕀𝕑, because she's Jewish, did not have many opportunities. That's obvious. She's very grateful to this woman and she wants to figure out who murdered her. There's also a sapphic romance. 𝕊𝕊𝕀𝕑 is in a love-hate relationship with 𝕊𝕆𝕋, who's also a part of the team. 𝕊𝕆𝕋 is her academic rival and she hates her passionately, but she's also obsessed with her and she wants to have sex with her, obviously. It's not a very deep book. I'm just gonna say that. The world building alone is a little bit of a facepalm, because I cannot take seriously books that simply copycat. The writing style, as I said before, also is too flowery, and usually I love flowery language, but in this case it was just very boring and incoherent. And I think the problem with the writing itself is that Allison Saft was trying to write a team action-packed fantasy, but she used very dark fairy tale retelling type of language. The writing style just didn't match the genre, the subgenre that she chose, and that's why I struggled. The story is not subtle at all. Take away some of the romance elements and you get a very classic young adult story. So I really don't know why the author really wanted it to be adult, or perhaps her editor wanted it to be adult. It's simply not. It's not adult. And I know myself, I wouldn't be able to finish it. This book put me into such a reading slump. I think I was reading it for about a month and a half, and that's a lot of time. I wouldn't be continuing with it at all if I wasn't reading it for the Feeble Book Club. I would have dropped it after a few chapters in different circumstances. So With a book club, I think it's kind of a hit or miss. Sometimes you choose a book that is so cool and that gives you more energy to continue reading, and sometimes the book just locks you into a reading slump, and because you have to read it, otherwise why have a book club at all? It's regressive for a hobby. The next book I'm thinking about DNFing. It's The Jasmine Throne by Tasha Suri. That was also a pick for our book club. The problem with this one is not that it's bad. I don't think it's bad necessarily. It's a little boring. And I'm not a big fantasy reader, so in some way I guess that's the problem. But also at the same time, there are a few fantasy novels that I love and a few fantasy series that I adore. But this one is just a little slow. It's a little slow, and I don't find many things fascinating so far for me to keep going. So I don't know if it's worth it at the end of the day. If you read this book, tell me what you thought about it. Tell me if it's worth continuing, specifically for a person that is not that much into fantasy, that doesn't read a lot of fantasy. Is this the book that I need to read because it's so good that people that are not fantasy lovers per se need to read it? Right now, I'm not feeling it. It has a lot of classic tropes. I think the setting is a little interesting, but at the end of the day, I don't feel the pull. I don't feel the need to read it. And with books that I know I'm going to love at the end, usually there is a pull, there's some kind of a suspense there that keeps me going forward. So these are all the books that I wanted to mention in my worst books of 2024. Not a lot, and I'm actually happy about it because why would I want to read bad books? I'm disappointed that I have not DNF'd some of the books that I've read in 2024 because some of them were 3 stars, they were okay, but I knew that I'm not going to love them at the end. That's the downside of having a booktube channel. You feel obligated to finish books so you would be able to talk about them, but I'm trying to wean myself off of this habit because at the end of the day, that's a hobby and I want to enjoy reading and not be in the constant reading slump. In the comments down below, tell me about the books that you've read in 2024 and you didn't love. You can also mention some of the books that I've read in January and I didn't love. If you have any recommendations for me based on your knowledge of what I enjoy, leave them in the comments down below as well. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it and I'll see you soon with another one. But until then, bye.